James Swift is a conversion therapy survivor of a horrific torture camp that was located in Louisiana. In this gruesome camp, he was beaten, sodomized, starved, caged. Staff performed shock treatment, tied him up. He was a complete victim of sex trafficking, all in the name of changing his sexual orientation. In spite of walking through this fiery journey of a living hell, he is here today to tell his story. He was on Utopia, Fox Network, and won Next Generation Indie Book Award for Rusted Rhinestone in 2016. Please welcome to the show, Mr. James Swift.
Hi, Jeneen.
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. So nice to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I am truly honored again to have you on the Pieces of Victory show. Your book, Rusted Rhinestones, is an inspiration to many. And I'm so proud of you coming forth and telling your story.
And I thank you for having me and for getting this type of information out to the people, because a lot of people don't know about conversion therapy.
I agree. A lot of people don't know what conversion therapy is. In fact, could you tell us a little bit about conversion therapy?
There are different types of therapies that they use, but back in the 80s, when I was a teenager, it was more of the torture and the reparative rape and things like that that were used. Now in the troubled teen industry, they try with different techniques with still physical abuse and just more pray the gay away instead of like when I was there and it was torture the gay away.
It was awful. It was awful. I've read your book, and it is awful what they did to you in that torture camp. I understand that 100% of your proceeds will go to the homeless children. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And for our audience, could you explain how they ended up, on the street and what exactly you're trying to do to help get them off?
After my ordeal, and then I grew up some after I was out of New Bethany, then I wanted to do something, started making money. I had a little extra money. And what I did is I was in New Orleans and there were so many kids on the streets, just so many homeless. And we would take them food, we'd collect their dirty clothes and wash them and take them back to them and just different things like that. But as I got to know these kids, a majority of them were on the street because their families either did not accept them for who they were, or they were escaping from conversion therapy.
Oh my gosh, that's awful, James. Awful. And I'm so happy that you are able to take your torment and turn it into something that's positive, that can help kids better themselves and get out of that darkness that you experienced. And that is healing for you. It's healing for them. It's amazing what you're doing, and I'm so thankful to have you here helping these children. James, could you tell me your background of being raised in the Worldwide Church of God? Eventually you were sent to an independent fundamental Baptist conversion therapy. What was it like growing up in your household as a child?
My parents were extremely religious, but with the Worldwide Church of God, we didn't have the holidays. We didn't have Easter or Christmas or birthdays or Halloween, none of that. We had holy days. And they were very, very, very firm believers in demon possession. And with that, because my mannerisms, I'm not the most masculine person in the world, I'm more feminine. And at 6 years old, with my feminine traits, the pastor told my parents that I was possessed by a gay demon.
That's awful.
And the only way that I could escape the grip of this demon was for me to suffer physical pain. So they took to it right away. I mean, from the time he told them that, it was beatings, and at least once or twice a week, severe beatings.
It's awful, and I read about that, and To have a parent not think outside the box, there's definitely something wrong with a pastor, directing, a parent to beat a child. Why didn't they just think outside the box? And that's where brainwashing comes into play. It's so sad that.
And this particular church was disbanded of like probably 20 years ago as a cult.
I could
And
see why.
the
Yeah.
leader was in prison.
Yeah, I can see why. James, I read most of your book. The only reason why I didn't complete it is the mere fact that it was just so horrific. I just couldn't. I couldn't get through it. I read the majority, but I couldn't get through it. I'm such an empathic person that I had to put the book down. How old were you when your parents started beating you? I think you had mentioned that before. I'm sorry. Could you say that again? How old?
I was 6.
6 years old. That is just awful. Did you try to reach out to a school counselor or social services? What happened? Tell me.
I did later in life. It was ninth grade, and I spoke with our school librarian, and she noticed that I wasn't a happy kid. I was the weird kid on the playground to begin with because of my mannerisms, and then you add the cult on top of that, and then the physical
Gosh.
abuse. But she wanted to know why I had on a long sleeve shirt in the middle of summer.
Oh, James, that's terrible. It's
And so when she
terrible.
pulled the sleeve up and she saw the bruises, she asked me what had happened, and I told her. Unfortunately, the first thing she did was pick up the phone and call my mother and tell her what I
Oh,
told her.
great. That's just terrible. And I'm sorry, can you repeat to the audience how old you were at this time when you confided with someone from school, from the library? Were you 9 or ninth
No, but
grade?
around 11.
11. Okay. Gosh, that's just awful. So, okay, so she went and called the librarian, called your mother, and of course that made it worse, I'm sure.
Uh, when I got home from school that day, it was the worst beating she ever gave me.
Oh my God. I, that's just awful. So obviously the librarian didn't know it was your mom that was doing the beating. She just knew
Yes,
you
I
were being
told her.
beaten. Oh,
I
you
told her it was
did?
my mom.
Why would she tell? Why would she tell the librarian? Why would the librarian tell your mother? Do
I
you
have
want
no
to do
idea.
that take again or no? Okay, keep rolling. Why would the librarian tell your mother? That just is just crazy.
I would
Crazy.
think my mother had a beauty shop, and that's how I ended up in the hair industry. And my mom did the librarian's hair. And I think that she just didn't want me telling other people because it would have been embarrassing to my mother.
It's just awful. That's awful. I wish she would have had some integrity. I understand that you were 15 years old when your parents sent you to a conversion therapy. Were you kidnapped? Could you tell us a little bit more about what happened?
Yes, now, in my opinion, it was being kidnapped, but it was sanctioned by my parents. Um, I knew that I was going away at 15, that I was going to camp, as they said. And I'd heard the other kids in school talk about camp, and I was kind of excited.
Oh
But
no.
shortly after my birthday, on December 2nd, I was asleep in my room, and these two men burst through the door, grabbed me out of the bed, and started pulling me down the hallway. And my parents were in the hallway, and I was yelling for them. And Dad said, James, just go with them. They're going to help you. So, and sound asleep to being drugged down the hall by two men that I did not know.
It's
Once
terrible.
they took me out of the house, there was a van parked in the driveway. The side door opened. There was a woman. She opened the door and she sat in the back of the van. They put me in the middle, and then the two men closed the door, and then they got on the driver's side and the passenger side. And I asked them where I was going, and the gentleman that was driving turned around and he said, well, It's none of your business, faggot.
Gosh, it's awful.
And we drove off. Um, Before we arrived at the facility, now I kind of had an idea where we were going down the interstate, and I saw the exit sign on I-20 for Arcadia. And then they put a pillowcase over my head where I could not see where I was going. And I asked the lady why she did it, and she said, "You don't need to know where you're going to be." Usually in juvenile conversion therapy, the parents sign over custody to these preachers
It's
so
awful.
that they can move the children across state lines without parental consent.
Right. It's awful. It's just awful. And to happen in the United States of America is just, it's despicable. How long were you in the conversion therapy, James?
17 weeks.
God, that's awful
It was
because I just want to share with the audience that 17 weeks is so long because what you endured in this camp, one day is horrific. But 17 weeks, I mean, this was like a torture camp here in America, maybe even worse when we get into it. I know it's hard for you to go back in time. Could you tell us what happened in the cage at New Bethany? Now, keep in mind when they took him to this conversion therapy, they threw him in a cage. James, can you tell us about that?
in the space where they had the cages. They were chain link, and the there were kids in all of them except for one. And they took me there. They took the padlock off of the little thing that opens the gate, and then they put me in. And they had already told me that their main goal was to break me mentally and spiritually, and that I was not allowed to say one word to anyone unless I was asked.
That's
Well,
awful.
I did speak to, after they left the room, I did ask the kid in the next cell over. I was like, "What is this place?" And the words no sooner than they left my lips, the lights brightened, and these three men came tearing into the room. They took my padlock off, they opened the gate, and this man walked in and just started beating me,
Oh my
hitting me
God.
with this huge Bible.
That's awful.
I started to fight back, and he yelled at me, "No, demon, you will not resist." So they thought that this 15-year-old kid that probably weighed 70 pounds was demon possessed.
That's awful. Awful. James, I'm so sorry that that happened to you, and it just gets worse. And I'm not sure if you want me to ask this question or not, but it's been on my mind for quite some time. I'm truly baffled, James. Let me get this straight. In order to convert a child from being gay to heterosexual, you're going to have numerous male sodomized boys promoting sex trafficking. Is this their ticket to heaven? So they're going to analyze scripture from the Bible, pointing out how God feels that homosexuality is an abomination, and yet how hypocritical is that? This was the kind of monster that was running a congregation and flippantly reciting scripture to fit his pedophile needs. It sounds like he had a twisted plan to condemn homosexuality and encourage parents to bring boys to his camp so he could torture them and run his business. This so-called preacher from hell not only sodomized little girls as well in the separate home for girls. I was Jennifer Halter's rape advocate. This preacher from a darker dimension got away with serial raping for decades. When it finally went to trial, he wasn't even indicted. Could you tell us a little more about that? How many children have made reports over a span of 3 decades? Why didn't authorities do anything? They sent children who ran away back to the torture camp after making reports. How is this possible, James? How?
It's possible because they have respect for the church, so to speak, and for this particular individual, who most really like psychotic people are very likable. They're personable, and He had spun his web. I personally have been with the DA in Bienville Parish and talked with him, and I was able to get my complaint in before my statute of limitations expired.
Oh,
Because
wow.
they had extended the statute of limitations.
And you're not alone. There is many, many survivors who have made these reports. Where the hell are these reports? Did they just vanish into thin air? Were they not writing them down? What happened to them?
They weren't as efficient back then as they are now. A few things have been found, but the people, the administration at New Bethany, even when I was released, they had instructed my parents to destroy all paperwork. When New Bethany was raided in 1982, they let them know they were coming. So they were able to destroy every bit
terrible.
of the evidence that linked the children to the facility.
That's terrible. And this is what I'm talking about. You know, when social services gives a warning about when they're coming over, or authorities, you know, are giving a warning. I mean, it's ridiculous. It gives people time to clean things up. That needs to change. That really needs to change. Surprise visits. These places need surprise visits, really.
Also, under the Religious Liberty Act, these places can be run with absolutely no accreditation and absolutely no supervision by the state.
And that has to stop. I mean, there's a separation of church and state, but we didn't tell you to abuse our children. And this is what happens. This is what happens when there's no oversight in these places. And we're trying to pass this bill. How long have we been trying to pass this bill for? It's ridiculous. This bill should have been passed a long time ago. And the reason why these places are running rampant like this, abusing children, is the mere fact that we don't have a bill in place. It's ridiculous. That bill needs to be passed. James, I understand that the conversion therapy your conversion therapy is not an isolated incident. These torture camps are spread throughout the nation. There are many other camps out there, such as wilderness camps, boot camps for kids, rehabilitation programs that are abusing our children across the U.S. James, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on in Louisiana? Is your congressman doing anything to provide oversight in these teen programs? Because evidently we need to make some changes here.
Okay, I personally have led the charge with many, many local people here. We have been bombarding our local officials, the mayors, the congressmen, the governor. I have personally sent probably 1,500 emails to John Bell Edwards, our governor. What is happening, they've just passed, not too terribly long ago, this new version of the religious right, you know, the Religious Liberty Act. And when you're bringing up charges against a church, it's a tough fight. People don't want to believe that goes on, but it does. We're living proof. But within the next 3 months, it's going to get a little bit warmer for these old bones to get out there. Then I will be at the Capitol, and there will be a protest.
Right.
Good for you.
Good for you, James. I'm so proud of you. Yeah, I would definitely like to make a sign that said separation of church and state, but we didn't say to abuse our children. James, I want you to look at the audience right now, and I want you to tell them, why is it wrong to send your child to a conversion therapy? Forget about the physical torture for just a second. What are the psychological damages of just sending your child to these places?
The first thing you're going to do is undermine your child's self-esteem and self-worth. The second thing you're going to do, and I suffer with this as well, is that nothing I do is ever good enough. No matter what circumstance or situation I'm in, I don't belong there. You're going to make your child, especially if it's religious conversion therapy, think that God hates them and that they don't deserve God's love.
So
And
sad.
for me, that has been the hardest struggle of them all. I
And
don't feel worthy. Many
so,
people don't. And then you see the suicides.
yes.
The reason that I came forward, well, the reason that I came forward and started acting and getting people together to fight against this was when I saw the story about Leila Alcorn. She was being sent back to conversion therapy by her parents.
Oh
And
my
to
God.
avoid going, she walked over to the nearest interstate to her house, timed it just right, and stepped in front of an 18-wheeler.
That's awful. Awful.
And I knew then that I wasn't doing enough. And I saw the parents when they talked to them, and they were like, she didn't tell us what was happening. She shouldn't have to tell you. You should
Right.
investigate where you're going to send your kid. You should
I
see if
agree.
they have complaints against them.
You know what, James? Can you tell the audience about the red flags to look for? I mean, first of all, just separating your child from the family is horrific enough, and then telling them that they're an abomination to God is just so sad, and then to separate them from the family and abandon them like that. Can you tell us what are some of the red flags to look for in these types of places? How about no communication, etc.? What goes
Right.
on? What are some of the red flags that parents can look for?
If you're not allowed to email or call your child for 6 weeks, something's going to happen.
That's a clue.
If
Some of
they
these things
ask
are
you
just
to
so
sign
basic.
over custody so that you won't know where your kid is, then that to me would be a red flag.
Right. And
If
sometimes
they
these parents are not looking at these red flags because, James, what are they telling the parents why they can't communicate with their child? They're feeding the parents this brainwashing technique of, oh, we're going to cure your child. But can you elaborate on that? Why the separation? What are they telling the parents of why they need to be separated?
In my case, they said that because, okay, let me start that over. In my case, my parents were told that since I was possessed by a demon,
It's
that
ridiculous.
family contact would only allow the demon to attach to them and drag them to hell with me.
Oh, and they believe this crap? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I don't know what else to say. That's terrible. Awful.
And even when I was released, my parents didn't let me back in the house at 15.
It's
I was on
awful,
the street, and
James.
so are so many of these other kids. And that's where you asked me about the book and the proceeds. Well,
And I
actually, I
read
have two
about
books
that
out.
in your book. Yeah.
But the money from that, 100% of it goes to, but first and foremost, we have to get these children legally separated from their parents. It's legal for them to kick them out because they're gay, believe it or not.
That's
But
ridiculous.
it's illegal for me to help them until they are emancipated from their parents.
Oh my God, what a double-edged sword that is. That's just awful.
And so, even me seeing a kid on the street, whether he's gay or not, if he's hungry and if I give him food, I'm breaking the law.
What the hell? Are you
Yeah,
kidding me? Are you kidding me right now?
not at all.
What is
No.
going on with
The United States of America.
So James, if you can't feed them on the street, what other options do we have? What could you do?
Well, you can have them come into a facility, like if there is a fast food restaurant or something there and they come in, then I
Okay.
can buy them some food. Okay, but I cannot say that they're with me because if they're juvenile and on the street and then they're with me,
Now we have a
and
problem.
I have a problem if I'm responsible for them because legally I'm not.
Right.
So I just tell them order whatever you want and just I'll say, hey, I'll get that, and we get it that way. What we do now is that with the kids contact me all the time after I was on the show, and I have a separate web page that is a public page, and the kids contact me, and I probably get 600 to 700 messages a month from kids all over America asking questions about what do I do, where do I go, and it's mind-boggling. Many of the shelters, if I send them to a shelter, most of them will either call their parents and have them just come get them, or they will put them in a 72-hour hold in a psychiatric facility because they think that they're mentally wrong. You
What?
know, yeah,
That's ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And back to the street, the homeless on the street, the homeless children. Let me reiterate, the homeless children on the street. So you can't help them. They're making it very difficult for you to help them, right?
yeah.
Why aren't they helping them? They're not helping them, but they're
They're
making
about-
it difficult for other people to help them. That's ridiculous. It's just ludicrous of what's going on.
In the United States of America.
Do you have anything else to add to that, James? I'm sorry.
Well, you had asked me about what the parents should know. When I left after 16 weeks, after 17 weeks, I had no self-worth, and I still struggle with that. I have physical scars that trigger me because I remember how that happened. If your kid tell you something, believe it. If they say something happened, it happened. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to make this stuff up.
Right.
If I would have had one of my 2 parents listen to me after I was put out of New Bethany, then the rest of my life, even though that part had happened and it was traumatic, the
Right.
rest of my life would not have been as traumatic.
Right. It's
And
one
like-
trauma after another, after another, after another. I mean, when you are going through so much pain and you are reaching out to your own parents for help and they refuse to help you or believe in you, it's just so damaging. Could you tell me the message that you want to convey to parents that are in this situation? They have a child who is gay. They're contemplating sending them to a conversion therapy. Obviously, conversion therapies are not working. We have seen it time and time again. What are the alternatives? What is a better solution? Could you tell us?
I'm so glad you asked this question. The first thing that I would tell a parent or plead for a parent to do is to check out their local community for a metropolitan community church or any all-inclusive religion that would allow them to speak to a pastor who does not believe in conversion therapy and the abomination theory.
Right.
The Metropolitan Community Church will also, there are camps and places that are safe that you can send your child, but instead of teaching them to hate themselves,
Right.
they learn to love themselves for who they are. Another thing is check your local larger cities in your area and look for an LGBT community center. They have a lot of outreach programs that work with young gay youth and trans youth. What people don't understand is it's a hard enough struggle inside of the child trying to figure out
Exactly.
who and what they are without the outside interferences. So Metropolitan Community Church, LGBTQI centers. You can also speak with, you can go online and look for the survivors from the places like I was sent. You can just Google conversion therapy in your area and just do it by the nearest first. Talk to survivors of where that have been to that place and tell
Exactly.
you what they sorry, and tell you what they have been through,
Right.
because we're not silent. We've never been silent, but they've tried to silence us.
I
So
agree.
would you rather your child be LGBTQI, or would you rather your child be dead? And a lot
Right.
of the times they answer dead.
That's just awful. Awful. James, I have another question for you. All of this torture, all of this training to go from being gay to straight, how much does this cost? How much does this program cost?
I've yet
I'm just curious how much your house of torment cost your parents.
I've yet to come across any of them that do not cost. All of them charge. When I went, and this is 1981, it was $25,000 per child. And that covered the 17 weeks. They then called and told my parents that they needed more money to send me to another camp to where they dealt with stronger demons.
That's terrible. Terrible.
My dad said
Awful.
no. He said, if you couldn't cure him for $25,000, you can't cure him at all.
It's just awful, James. $25,000 to put your kid through a living hell and have psychological damages for the rest of their life and to feel
And
inadequate to society, and the list
conversion
goes on.
therapy camps don't pay taxes.
I'm sorry, say that again about the taxes so our audience can hear.
The religious run conversion therapy camps are tax free. They don't pay taxes.
Yes, let's go over that. That's just crazy. Crazy.
And
So on top of the ludicrous amount of money to torture your children, it's tax free.
yeah. So actually it's even in the states now to where there's a ban on juvenile conversion therapy, it doesn't apply to religious organizations. So places like I was sent, even though there would be a ban in place, doesn't make a difference. And there's no oversight. So that's that.
Yep. And
They're not
again,
even-
there's no oversight, and this is why we're trying to pass that bill to stop child abuse in residential programs, Teens Act. And
Yes.
Adam Schiff is the one who reintroduced that. So let's get that bill passed. James, I want to do a little bit of a role reversal right now. I want you to, close your eyes and think about you taking the place of your parents. I want you to look at your son in the face, who is now you, James Swift. He just told you that he's gay and he's scared, but at the same token, he's brave enough to tell you who he really is. What measures do you take to love him and reassure him that he is not a mistake and one of the greatest gifts to the universe?
Oh, wow. One thing that I never heard from either parent is, I'm proud of you. Not once in my life.
It's awful.
I would tell that child that I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy that you have this relationship with me, because that's how it should be. A child should be able to tell a parent anything
Exactly.
and not be judged.
I agree.
Also, I would not have had an issue, even if I weren't gay. I would not have an issue, because it takes all kinds to make this world go round. And you destroy so much when you don't believe a child, or if you tell a child they're damaged. I would pick that kid up and I'd give him a big hug, and I would then educate him about HIV and everything else that he might come across in his life that he would need to cross a boundary with. Just love that child and nurture. You never know what they'll be or what they'll accomplish, or don't limit them. Just don't limit. Don't be your child's first bully.
Right.
Don't do it.
Exactly. They're already having enough time, a hard enough time as it is in society. Why are you going to
Yes.
make it so difficult for them in the home?
And
It's
so many
awful.
parents, the first thing is, what did I do wrong? You did nothing wrong. Nothing. So they're worried about the embarrassment. Oh, I've got a gay child. And then here's the kid. Well, I don't want to come out to my family because they're going to disown me and I'm going to let them down. They're going to be disappointed. It's lose lose. Just
Right.
educate yourself.
And that's,
Know
go ahead, James.
exactly what your child needs by having them be honest and open with you, and don't shut them down. Don't beat them. Don't throw them out, and don't put them in conversion therapy. And I will add that it's estimated right now, that there's at least 150,000 juveniles in conversion therapy in America.
It's awful. Awful. And let's go back to the parents again. The foundation of your confidence level, I believe, stems from your parents. And if you don't have that support system in the home, how are you going to be able to deal with society? Because
You
society
can't.
is tough. You can't. It's awful. And that's why it's so important to have that foundation in the home. James, can you tell me what the repercussions are for kicking your child out of the house?
Yes. I've been dealing with these kids for 27 years on the street. And the biggest thing I see is human trafficking. These parents need to ask themselves, what is my child going to eat? Where is my child going to stay? And what are they going to have to do to put a roof over their head and put food in their mouth? We've also had to do community donations to fund funerals.
Oh my God, that's awful. It's
Kids,
awful.
we found a kid in a dumpster once in New Orleans.
Oh my God,
We've had
James.
several that would wash up on the Mississippi River because they jumped off the bridge. And
Oh
these
my
are
God.
juvenile. So ask these parents, what I would like to say to them is, you're condemning your child to do something that you would not want them to do.
Right.
They
This is,
steal, they get beat up,
they're desperate.
they get tortured, and they get raped. It is absolutely heartbreaking. I have sat and talked with these kids so many times, different kids. I've had some that, even with me trying to help them, because I can't take them out of their home, I can talk to their parents, I can talk to them, and then I'll get a call. Well, so and so got my shotgun and killed himself.
Oh my God. James,
All
can
the
you?
kids that I encounter on the street, I have them write a letter home and I mail it myself for those parents to know what that child is living at that moment.
Wow.
And I really thought about writing a book and calling it The Letters Home.
Oh, you should do that, James. You should.
But I feel like I'm breaking their confidentiality, and I couldn't do it. I feel like that I would never do anything to break the bond between the kids that I try to help and that I do help, and for them not to trust me.
Right.
And the
James,
hardest thing to do is to put that stamp on an envelope after I've talked to this kid for being on the street long enough for me to even get part of the story and to get them on my list,
right.
and mail that letter after they're dead.
Oh,
It is so hard.
sorry. Sorry, James.
And I've had to do it several times.
I'm sorry. Could you tell me, James, I know that when you are helping these kids out, it's healing for you, and at the same token, I'm sure it's taxing on you, especially it's hitting so close to home for you, and you're going over old wounds all the time, but you just punch through it because you really care for these kids. That's so admirable of you to do that.
Thank you.
Can you tell me exactly what kind of conversation is going on with these parents? Are you getting through to them? What can you give me an example of what their reactions are when you try to explain their point of view as a third party? What are you making any headway? What's going on?
I feel like I'm beating my head against a brick wall. Uh, in my area, in this area, in the Deep South, we have the more evangelical churches, and they don't see their child as a child of God. Okay, their child
Awful.
is an abomination. That's what they were taught. And
So it's lots of
I,
brainwashing going on.
yes, and well, indoctrination is what I think it is. But I do get through to some of the parents. My best case scenario is there's a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or someone that the child can move in with to at least finish school.
Right.
Even with the kids that email me and they tell me what living hell they're going through, I recommend, if at all possible, as long as it's not physical or sexual,
Right.
tough it out until you get your diploma, at least.
Right.
I've had parents call the police on me. I've had parents
Wow.
tell their kids, well, the big thing, did he touch you? No, I don't even meet a kid without a police officer there.
Oh my gosh.
I have to cover
Yeah, I
my
don't blame
tracks.
you. I don't blame you to protect yourself.
Yes,
It's just awful. Okay, so these parents are so worried that you're going to touch their child, and yet they
but
think
they
their
kick
kids,
out.
but they're kicking them out, or they're calling them an abomination to God. I'm so confused here. It's
And
just.
imagine that.
I can't wrap my head around this logic.
Go ahead, James.
Well, imagine the confusion that we have trying to figure out why and how a parent can do this. Imagine a 14, 15, or 16-year-old who's on the street, and most homes will not take a child under 17. So they have nowhere to go.
I
I
know.
will open my own shelter, and we will take these kids in.
Oh,
I've been in the process of doing this for years. There are so many intricate laws that we can't skirt, that we either have to have the laws changed or there has to be a legal way for us to be able to emancipate these children, give them a safe environment. I would like Learning Training Academy. I would like to take these kids, get them safe, partner with local businesses, make sure they get their GED and learn a skill. Even if you're flipping burgers, honey, you're making a paycheck. And
Right.
that is pride, that's self-worth,
exactly.
so that they don't have to turn to the alternative. If the kids are taught a trade,
And that
they'll make
helps self-esteem too when you're productive and you're making something of yourself. It doesn't matter if you're sweeping floors or whatever it is that you're doing, you're contributing. And when you're contributing and being self-sufficient, that empowers you. James, can you tell us are you doing a GoFundMe for this?
I have done a GoFundMe in the past for help to open the shelter, and then I took it down because of the amount of hate mail that comes with it.
That's
Uh,
awful.
I get donations from online followers. Sometimes I'll put on there, look, y'all, we're $50 short. We need this, we need that. And someone will send it in. My entire income and most of what besides, the rent and all that kind of stuff, all of that goes to it. My brother donates every 2 weeks, and then
wow.
every cent from the books, and my third book will be coming out soon. But even to open a charity so that I can be tax deductible for the donation. In the Louisiana legal system, I have to jump through hoops because they see me as the predator. And
Oh.
I'm like, y'all, there's no way. And I have been vetted and vetted and vetted. There's
And yet,
nothing there.
and yet they've never done anything to the preacher from hell that was running New Bethany. He wasn't even indicted. I don't get it. He's a serial rapist, and survivors have made numerous reports to authorities, and yet that was open for decades. And here you are trying to help these kids, and they're coming down on you. I just don't get it. I really don't.
Either. But I do tell you that we may have to skirt around a little bit, but these kids do get the help that I can give them, anything. And especially like going on the route every week and dropping off clean clothes and picking up dirty clothes. I mean, these kids are out there. I cannot bring them home, but I can give them every comfort that I possibly can. We
That's
do the
so awesome.
box lunches, canned goods. We are taking care of kids tomorrow. So,
And to think that someone like this is an abomination to God is just
the
unbelievable.
abomination to me is the parents.
Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly it. I mean, it's ridiculous. You have really made something of yourself. You took something that was so horrific and dark and turned it into the light. And to me, that is the greatest gift to the universe. And I thank you, James, for all that you do. I think we need to get a website for you together and have a donation button so we could help these kids. And I can put something together for you. I would
Well,
love
I
to
do.
do that.
Someone did put something together on Building Beyond You, and it's
Okay.
the war on LGBT youth. It's not over, and there is a PayPal thing there, but the only thing about that is until I can become a charity, then I have to pay taxes on the donation.
Okay.
So with me, it's by the books. It's just about the only way that I can get around and have the funds. It's unless they want to make personal donations, but still it's complicated because then it increases my income and makes me into a higher tax bracket, which takes less money away from the kids.
Which is shocking to me. Let's go back to New Bethany and these organizations that are off the grid. They're not being taxed. They're torturing children. Here you are trying to help children, and you have to jump through these hoops. It's
Right.
just unbelievable about where we have. You need to make your own church, James.
That has been a discussion. The only thing is I'm not qualified to lead a church.
I think you are.
I think you are. I think
You
you're already
think?
leading a church.
You are, yeah.
In essence, you are.
You're leading a spiritual
You're,
revival.
you're already leading a spiritual
quest.
quest, yes, to help these children. So, yes, you do. James, I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming on my show. If you have a child and you're thinking about sending them to a conversion therapy, you may want to reconsider. If you have a 50%, 30%, 10%, or how about a 1% chance that this could happen to your child, would you still go through taking that risk? Let's close down these abusive camps that are tormenting and abusing our children by bringing them to the surface. I am Jeneen Miller, and this is Peace is a Victory.